Stephen Bothwell, PhD candidate and research scientist at the University of Newcastle. May I pick your brain?
Absolutely.
So, what do you do?
Well, I'm a PhD student at the University of Newcastle and I study stroke and intracranial pressure. So that is the pressure in the head. Specifically, I look at a component of the pressure in the head, which is cerebrospinal fluids, and how that moves around in the head after stroke.
Okay, so there's fluid in the head and you're worried about the pressure in the brain with how it moves around. But to be honest, I'm not entirely sure how the way that the fluid moves around in the head actually impacts on stroke recovery. And that's what you're looking into. So could you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you a little bit of a background to cerebrospinal fluid first. So cerebrospinal fluid is a fluid that really bathes the brain and the spinal cord. It acts to protect it from mechanical injury. It can deliver nutrients to like different tissue parts. And recently it's been implicated in waste clearance while we sleep.
Okay.
So that fluid is circulating our brain and that contributes to intracranial pressure.
To be clear, I know that there's blood in blood vessels.
Mhm.
And I think most of our audience here understands about the circulation, but where is this other fluid?
So we have spaces in our brains that actually produce the cerebrospinal fluid. So the fluid goes through the spaces in our brains and circulates out and around our brains and then around our spinal cords as well. So it's just sort of surrounding, but also like inside the actual brain itself.
Right.
Yeah.
And before I interrupted, you were saying that it's helping with waste management while you sleep.
Yeah, so there's some really interesting research that shows that while we sleep, cerebrospinal fluid can actually move through the tissues and just pick up any waste that's really been produced through the day. So our brains are really active in terms of metabolism, so they produce a lot of waste products. So it's really important to get rid of that and sort of feel a little, like refresh things for the day ahead, I guess. So in terms of stroke, when we're looking at that, it has cerebrospinal fluid itself actually has like a predefined clearance pathway to help with clearing those proteins and waste buildup mechanisms. So we look at how those clearance pathways might actually be disrupted after stroke. And that's really important because if the clearance pathways are disrupted, then you'll get a buildup of cerebrospinal fluid itself, which can increase pressure. And if you have an increase in pressure after stroke, it can really limit blood flow to vulnerable tissue regions and can actually worsen damage.
Okay, so that sounds particularly important because we're trying to optimize blood flow while people are taking part in rehabilitation so that they can get their brain to heal, in the best way.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the primary targets of preventing damage after stroke is actually restoring blood flow as quickly as possible, just making sure our brains are getting adequate blood supply and oxygen supply. So if there is a buildup in pressure that then compresses those blood vessels or prevents blood from reaching where it needs to be, then that's when we'd see the sort of worst outcomes where you'd get a little bit more tissue degradation and patient deterioration, essentially. So we're trying to really translate that and prevent that rise from actually occurring in the first place.
Okay, so what is it about your research? What is the work that you're doing? Is that going to reduce the pressure or optimize the pressure, and how?
So my work is extremely
1 minute snapshot of it.
Okay, absolutely. Well, that is the overarching aim, I guess, is to reduce that rise in pressure that we see after stroke. But my work is really at the sort of foundational stages. So at the moment, I'm looking at one of the outflow pathways for cerebrospinal fluid and just trying to gain an understanding of how that's actually impaired after stroke. So we are at the very basic levels just now, but obviously the aim of any sort of research is get it through to the stages where we can actually target those pathways that we identify for treatment. So I hope that one day the work that I'm doing actually moves through to the point where we can then say, yep, this person has a rise in pressure. Let's apply this drug that targets the pathway that Stephen found out, and we can reduce that pressure rise and essentially help people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I mean, across the university and through to HMRI and at the John Hunter Hospital, there's people working at all stages of the research, right? So you're doing some of the very basic foundational work. And we say basic, just by the way, not because what you do is basic and easy to understand, but we call it a basic science because it's kind of right at the start, looking at the cells and the brain processes. And then once things move along, then it turns into a treatment that we can test with people to make sure that they're not just struggling on with rehabilitation without awesome conditions in their brain. That's how I understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, in Newcastle, as you said, we've got a great sort of range of stroke researchers where we actually have people working at the laboratory level and rehabilitation level. And I think Newcastle's great for facilitating the links between those groups so that we can actually understand where everyone's coming from and kind of target rehabilitation and patient improvement from different angles.
Yeah. So look, while we're here, if you've got any particular questions for Stephen, just put them in the chat or get in touch, because these are conversations we want to keep on having so that you can know what things are being worked on and what's next in treatment. But before we go into any more detail, why did you come into science? Why did you want to work in research?
I love research for really just the opportunity to like dive into a subject that I'm really passionate about. So I think one of the main reasons I chose to do a PhD is I got to the end of my undergrad and I just kind of felt a little bit like, oh, is that it? I feel like I've just scratched the surface. So through my PhD and through my research just now, I've really been able to kind of get stuck into some of the more challenging aspects of science and of sort of biomedical research overall, and actually be able to contribute to the knowledge that I used to just read in textbooks, but I'm now kind of generating that output. It's honestly an amazing experience.
And we're lucky to have people who are really passionate about this like yourself. So thank you for coming into science. I guess my last question for you today is, what kind of things do you do to optimize your brain health?
Well, yes, it's definitely important to take some breaks away from the lab, and I really like to explore Newcastle and the surrounding area. So I feel really lucky that we've got such easy access to some amazing beaches and to some amazing nature reserves. So I really like to go out and explore and get a little bit active. But also, as you can see, I have my hammock in the background for those days where I'm not feeling entirely active and just want to kind of laze around a little bit.
So keeping active and relaxing.
Yeah, so it's all about balance, you know.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for chatting to us today. We'll keep this conversation going. If you've got any questions about the cerebrospinal fluid, that's the fluid that's taking waste away from the brain, and it's got to do with brain pressure, ask us. Either put them in the chat, get in touch, and we'll talk to Stephen again soon. Thanks for letting me pick your brain.
Thank you.